Hello, hello, hello. Is there some sound? Test, test, 1, 2, 3. Hello, hello, hello. Is there some sound? Okay, great. There is some sound. So, welcome back to the stream for our platforming game. And today there will be just a short stream, not a long one. Because I'm a little bit tired. This week is a rough one for me. But I still want to do the tiny little things and do some optimizations and some refactoring in our game. And I was actually already working a little bit on the game. And I want to go through the changes that I did so far. Also, I saw by accident that we actually had a herd animation for our character, which means that when he's running into the saw, then we could actually play that animation. And we don't do that yet, so I added that as a to-do for the next day, but not for today. And hello, the lazy guy. May I know why you still use LibGDX? What do you mean by that? What else should I use besides LibGDX? And what do you mean with still? Why still? Okay, so first of all, the track creation, I simplified that quite a lot because we had a logic where we set it an entity tag on some entities, and then in a separate step, I went through, iterated through all those entities with that specific tag. And then we created the tracks and bound it to it and added this track component stuff. And we also added this boundary information to the tiled component, and all of that is no longer necessary because I simply do that now in one step directly. So where we had the spawn game objects, I think it was called, it's not directly there. Where is it? Like here we had 3 steps. So we had the static ground bodies, then we had the dynamic bodies, and as a third step, we had this track creation stuff. And I removed that and simplified that because that made way more sense. So first of all, I get the track layer before we iterate over all objects, because then we don't need to get this layer again and again and again. And in the end, I simplified or optimized or refactored this method here a little bit. So all of that is known from before. So that was this component creation. And then below there was a huge block with if statements. So if map object property had entity tags, that we added a component. If it had animation, then we added the animation component, yada, yada, yada. And I refactored that and extracted it currently in a separate file where I added a lot of utility methods. Like, let's just check out one of these. So they all extend this entity creation context, which is this one here. So when you call world.entity, then you are inside an entity creation context and can add components to an entity. And there I extracted now all these different extension functions, which are basically the if blocks that we had before in the other method, but now they are separated outside there. First of all, in my opinion, that makes it a little bit nice that we have this tiled entity component integration here as separate methods with the different checking of the properties and then just adding the components wherever we need it. So that one was extracted. And the last thing, also the better thing, is that this method is not so long anymore. It's quite short, and it's easy to read what is happening. So entity gets created, that you see there are tags added, an animation, a state, jump live, So that is way better. And one part is the configure track extension method, where now basically what we did before with this logic, how to identify the track and get the vertices and all this stuff. And this is now directly happening in this configure track extension method, which adds a track component to the entity. So all of that we had before is now way easier, a little bit refactored. And yeah, I like it more than it was before. Also, it's easier to do it like that. What else did I do? Okay, then I also made the source a sensor. What I mean with that, so before we were able, or it was possible to jump on a saw, or actually that you could not run through a saw because it was blocking you, because its shape, so the circle shape that we had was really doing some collision stuff with our player. And now, as you can see, it's no longer blocking us. So we can run through saws, which is, in my opinion, a better behavior. So I checked it in some other platforming games, for example, Super Mario as well. So when you get in contact with an enemy, for example, if you have a mushroom, then you get small, so you lose your power up, but you can run through enemies and also, for example, through saws, etc. So I think that is more natural and better from a player perspective if it behaves like that. What I could think of that we might want to add, so especially when you get in contact with the saw, first of all, the hurt animation should be displayed so that you really see that you are taking damage from that. And what I could also think that we maybe apply a force to the player that he gets pushed back a little bit. So when you run inside the saw, that it pushes you away for, I don't know, 2 or 3 world units, something like that. That might make sense as well. But for now, again, saws are just some jump sensors, and we can now run through them, which is, in my opinion, a little bit, or feels more natural than what we had before. Okay, that was this part. Oh, also, there was one funny behavior. Let me see if I can reproduce that, because that was a little bit buggy and was related to the delta time that we used in our game. So before the minimum, I set it to this one, so 0.25 seconds. And now I reduced it to 1 divided by 30. Why? Because, let me check that. So I had this change, and also in the track system, there's a tolerance which was small. I think it was 0.1. And let me see if I can reproduce it. So I start the game, and then I maximize the screen. Now it worked. Let me try it a few times. I hope I can reproduce it. Maybe. Wait. Can I maybe... let me try. Maybe I can simulate it. So let's pass as a delta time. Let's always pass, for example, a second for now. Let's try that briefly. I think that should give me the result that I want. Shit, I cannot wait. Let me then also move the player, because if everything now updates just once a second, that's a little bit weird. Let's move ourselves here, and now I hope we can see it. Yeah. Actually, we can see it because there are 2 saws missing, as you can see it here. Let me reduce it. Maybe with the smaller delay, we can see what is really happening. Yeah, that was too fast. Let's go to 0.1. Yeah, so now you saw it. One of the saws was going off screen. And why is that happening? So if we increase it a little bit, then both of the saws are actually moving away. So why is that happening? That's a good question, and I can explain it. Because what we currently have, a track is just some lines. So like this, then maybe another line here, and one final line here. And our logic is like this. So we have a circle shape as well for the saw, something like this. And we have a logic that this saw is now moving towards the different vertex of our track. And there is a specific tolerance. So if the center of this shape, or of the saw, let's say, is very close to the vertex here, then it will move to the next vertex. And this is working as long as we have a very small time step and no lag behavior in our game. Then this is perfectly working. But very similar to what I explained with Box2D and bodies moving or clipping through a wall, the problem comes when we have a bigger delta time and the update of the physics step is way too big. So what could happen that we are very close to the vertex here, but there is a little bit of a lag in our game for whatever reason, some background process or whatever. And the body is now not moving a small step like this, which would then be detected as it is in range of this vertex. Instead, it makes a bigger move, so maybe something like this. And suddenly, since we never update the angle, we just calculate it once where the body needs to move towards. So suddenly he's actually moving away from that vertex and will never reach this location and simply then moves out of screen, so endlessly towards that direction. And to avoid that, we could either increase the tolerance, but that would be a little bit weird because then the shape is never, or the saw is never going to the vertex directly. It's always changing the direction before it actually reaches the final vertex, which is not what we want. In my opinion, better solution is to make sure that these small physics jumps cannot happen. And yeah, the solution there was to simply use a smaller minimum delta time of 130. Where did I get that value from, or why do I use that? I simply checked the stage class from LibGDX in 2D. And there is this act class or act method. It's not a class, it's a method. The act method, which is updating all the actions and actors and widgets and so on. And in there, they have a similar logic. So they take for the update, so the delta time, they use either the GDX graphics delta time that we are getting, or if that is too big, then it's 1 divided by 30. So they also, or I explained that once, so that is a typical solution to that problem with huge delta times. And that's why I basically did the same and reduced this minimum delta time to 1 divided by 30, which is good enough in our case. And with that, our saws will never go off track, because even if we have a lag, like for example, when I resize, there is a bigger delta time than usual. And now, since that is always cut off to 1 divided by 30, which is small enough for our physics system, we can never get these things out of the track. A second weird behavior that I had is before I made the shapes a sensor, I once jumped on the saw and then I simply exploded to the sky for whatever reason, which was most likely also related that there was a bigger delta time for whatever reason, and then the physics simulation calculated something very weird. And yeah, so that was the fix there. A small one, but important one for our gameplay. Then I found a cool and very concise way in Kotlin to make a string, so a multi-line string. I showed it in a moment. And get rid of all the new lines, because one example would be our tiled service, where we have the spawn game object, and at the end we had quite a long string. I reduced that also a little bit because it was no longer necessary, but there we had a bigger string, a debug message that we wanted to print, and we used this, I don't know how that is even called, is it multi-line template string or whatever? So basically those 3 quotations in Kotlin, and there you can then simply make a break, a line break, and continue the string. And in the end, for example, with this trim margin, that method then detects those margins here, so these pipes, and everything that is in front of the pipe will be cut off so that the string is then concatenated together, but there are still the new lines in it. So since we make here a line break, then of course there will also be a line break in the final string. But that one is that little one-liner here, so replace. I did not come up with that myself. That was simply a Stack Overflow thread. But there is a regular expression that we can use. And the way I understood it, but please correct me if I'm wrong, it basically detects any amount of new lines. So this is this /n star, which means 0 or more new lines followed by 1 single new line, which is always happening since we make here 1 new line. So here you don't see it, but basically there is this new line character. And that one gets then replaced by $1, and $1 means simply the amount of new lines that it found in this first regular expression group or whatever that is called. And since in our case, before the new line, there are 0 new lines, it simply means that the single new line gets replaced with 0 new lines, so no new lines at all. And what we get then is, for example, this one here. Is that correct? No, that's not correct. Where is this debug message? Spawning entity. So here, you see, that's now a one-liner. So map object ID, tiled ID, game object, all of that is now combined into a single line with that small little one-liner here at the end, which is very cool in my opinion. I use the same also for the profile system, which is used for the header of our application. So here at the top, here I use now the same approach, which makes it easier to add some additional debug information if we need, makes it easy to read, but still keeps it as a single string. So that is a small thing, but a cool one. Good, then, yeah, that was that one. Then I made a contribution to LibGDX, and we are actually now using a different version. We are now using, where are the Gradle properties? We are currently now using KDX 112.1 minus snapshots. And what did I add there? Let me show it to you. I think the easiest one is if I show you the pull request. That's this one here. So first of all, I ask him if he thinks that those are useful extensions for the library and if he wants to have them. And he said, yes, by the way, this guy is always super friendly and he helped me a lot. And I also learned a lot from him, especially regarding Kotlin. And I will also show you a cool trick that I learned from him. The extensions that I added were basically the math extensions that we had, so that you can destructure a rectangle and an ellipse. I think those were the ones that we had. And in addition, I also added their extensions for a circle to destructure it, for a polyline to get the X and Y value. So those extensions are now part of LibGDX, and we could then remove the math file that we had, which contained these extensions, because they are now part of the library. And the second thing was, and that is quite a funny one, or a cool one, is the use extension that we had for the patch tiled map renderer. I think in our case it was what did we use? I think orthographic, the orthogonal tiled map renderer. There we had this use extension here and a method somewhere below. But this is now also part of LibGDX, where I added several variants to it. So the use method where you can pass a camera, then a use method where you pass the projection, X, Y, width, and height, because there was also a function for that in this patch tiled map renderer, and also a use function with where you can pass the boundary as a rectangle, and the use function without any arguments, which does not set the view. And there is now a very cool trick that I did not know, because what we did, let me explain it to you like this. So in this patch tiled map renderer, we actually wanted to call a begin render and end render. So those two methods here, first this one, then we do our render logic, and then we call end render. But we were not able to do that because those methods are protected, which means we cannot call them. You can only call public methods, usually from other classes, but not protected or private methods. But, and I did not know about that, there is a funny trick in Kotlin where you can, where do you see it? Here, where you can basically just, as the package name that is at the top of the file, you just need to enter the same package of the class that where you want to call the protected methods. Maybe it also works with the private methods, not sure, but the protected methods are working. So you need the same package. Then usually you get a warning, because this file, as you can see here, it's in the package KDX tiled, but here I say it's in that specific package of the patch tiled map renderer. this little warning you can simply suppress with this add suppress annotation. And then, as you can see here, when you make now, for example, an extension, what was that? I think maybe the stream was away for a moment. I'm not sure. Anyway, when you make now an extension function, for example, of the patch tiled map renderer, you can call the protected methods. So the begin render and the end render method, which was quite interesting for me. So that, to me, that looks more like a bug, maybe in Java as well, but also in Kotlin for sure, that you can bypass protected modifiers or visibility modifiers. How are they called? But in that specific case, it's actually quite useful because now the use extension that I showed before can now call the real methods, so the protected methods. And if for whatever reason the implementation would change, or if you use your own custom batch tiled map renderer, the extension, so this use extension, would still work because it really calls these protected methods. So that's a very nice trick, which I learned from the guy from LibGDX. And yeah, so basically these extensions are now in LibGDX, and they are also better, in my opinion, than the ones that we had. Rahul, is Java better or C#? I think there is no big difference. From what I know, Java and C# are very, very similar. And choose whatever you want. From personal experience and from what I know, if you are a Java developer, you will more likely get a job, at least in Europe. I see that there are way more Java projects than C# projects with .NET and .core or whatever the framework is called there. So if you want to get a job, I would prefer Java over C#, but I think it's really up to you. Would you recommend monogame over LibGDX? If so, why? If not, why? Monogame was recommended by someone when I did the poll which library we should use for our platforming game. And I personally have no experience with monogame. I just know, I think it's the C# library, right? If I'm not mistaken. One framework for creating powerful cross-platform games by leveraging C# and other .NET languages. Yeah, so if you know I would then say if you know C#, then go with monogame. If you know Java, then use LibGDX. I think it's as simple as that. Good, so those were the contributions. I also told you the trick with the protected methods, which I found very interesting. Then, that's the last thing that I did, and that actually sounds like, wow, quite a lot. You did crazy things. Why did you not stream them? All of that did not take up a lot of time. I think in total it was maybe an hour. I think the biggest one was LibGDX to write the documentations and get the pull request right and everything with the feedback loop and so on. But in the end, those were really just some very, very small things. And I did not start the stream for those minor things. Also, I think 2 of them I did after the stream on Sunday and 2 of them I did on Monday or Tuesday. I cannot remember. The last one, and then I want to continue a little bit today. The last one is this optimization of the user interface, which was also quite easy. I did not expect that. But the 2 things. So first of all, I created a patch file to start Skin Composer so that I don't need to always run the console and write java -jar something. Then I found out that, let me open our project, that there is a 9-patch editor in Scene Manager, which is really cool. And I created the banner that we had before is now a 9-patch. And also the button is a 9-patch. And you basically click here on Add. And then you can create a 9-patch here directly. You then load the image. So for example, let's take the frame. And below you have a preview that you can drag and drop, so make it bigger and smaller and so on. And then it's very similar to the website that I used in my tutorials. So there is, where are the borders? So here you can then define, let me zoom in a little bit. That seems to be like a bigger graphic. You can define the 9 patch. So the center area, I usually call it like that, which gets then stretched. And the borders, so the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the 4 edges and the 4 corners, which are not getting stretched. And below you see then the outcome. And when you click on save, it simply saves then this, or it converts this image or this graphic to a 9 patch file. So that's actually quite useful that it's built in also in this scene manager. Saves me a lot of time because I also usually use their an online version for this 9 patch creator. And it's cool if we can combine everything in here in one single tool, which helps a lot. And the second thing is that our graphics were actually quite blurry. I don't know if I can easily reproduce it. I think I can easily reproduce that. A moment, I will then read the comments again, but I want to finish this topic here. So the problem was when we go to, where was it? File, save as? No. Settings? Yes, settings. And then open texture packer settings for file export. And the main problem here was the, where is it? The filter min and filter max. So this is minimum and magnetizing. So this is like the, I don't know, algorithm or whatever you want to call that, that it applies when an image is small or gets smaller or bigger than its original size. And the default value here is linear, which in my opinion, or from what I know, is a good value if you work with bigger graphics. So if you don't work with pixel graphics or pixel art, then linear is the better one to choose. But if you work with pixels or with pixel graphics, then nearest is actually the better option to choose. But to show you the difference, so let's quickly change that to linear. And let's quickly also export our skin JSON once more, not this one. Export. So skin JSON, everything stays the same. Export. Okay, done. And I hope that we can now already see the difference. So you see here, this is, I don't know if you see it in the stream, but the graphic is a little bit blurry. Also here below, it's not that sharp. So it's little bit like linear interpolation, let's call it like that. And let me try, can I make a screenshot maybe that we can directly see the differences next to each other? So let me make a snippet here. And let's open it somehow. Okay, perfect. And now let's switch back. So let's go. Do I still have it open here? So let's go back now to the nearest settings for the texture atlas and export it one more time. Okay. And let's open up or start the game now once more. And now you should hopefully already see a difference. Let's make another snippet here. Did it now overwrite the previous one? No. Ah, okay, that's unfortunate. I did not know that it opens it in the same window. But anyway, I hope you could see it. I'm not even sure. But basically, so the pixel or the edges of the graphics, they were not so sharp in the version before with the linear filtering because it's applying linear interpolation. So between different pixels, it applies some interpolation. And when you have pixel graphics like we have it, where you have very sharp edges and no... so you have pixel in one color and the next one is already in a completely different color, and you want to keep that, then you want to have the nearest filtering and not the linear filtering. So that's why now it looks a lot better. And in my opinion, also the player health bar is now good enough. We could move it to the top left, I'm not sure, but currently I'm happy with that. So that was a very simple fix, and just for you, again, keep that in mind when you work with texture atlases and with pixel graphics. Choose the nearest option for this filtering, because otherwise your graphic or there's some linear interpolation in your graphic, and then it does not look so sharp anymore, at least for pixel art. Okay, let me read now. I'm currently a Java developer, but I see more resources for C#. That's why I was wondering, making the switch. Okay, so for you, it's the other way around. Interesting. So for my company, it's actually the other way around. So as I mentioned before, there are a lot of Java projects, but not so many C# projects. It's also the same for my previous company where I worked for. There was also mainly Java, C and C++ a little bit, then JavaScript, TypeScript, of course, but almost no C#. Also, what are your thoughts on Kotlin? Is it worth the switch from Java? For me, it definitely was worth the switch because I love the language, because it's, in my opinion, I'm just faster with it, and the code that I can produce is also easier to read and understand than the Java counterpart. And what we also see, if you follow the latest Java releases a little bit, they are introducing actually a lot of convenient features that Kotlin brings. They built that in now into the JDK, but still with this, in my opinion, a little bit of Java overhead, that you need to type so many things all the time to get the same behavior than in Kotlin. But one reason or one example would be in Kotlin, can we create a Scratch file? I think there should be something. Scratch file, Kotlin. So in Kotlin, there are data classes. For example, I don't know, a car, and a car has, for example, an amount of tires, I don't know, which is an integer, and maybe a name. And the data class built in automatically creates the equals method, a toString method for all the properties. Hash code, I guess, is also overridden. And I think that's it. So the counterpart in Java would be, can we also make a Java thing? So at least in old cool Java, it would be, let me also split right, that we have that next to each other. And let me zoom in a little bit. I just want this one here. Okay, and here also let's zoom in a little bit. So here we would also have a car. And then you have a private final int amount of tires and a private final string name. Then we would need the constructor for those two properties. Then we would need the getter for all these properties. I forgot the second one. So those 17 lines of Java are basically this single line here that we have in Kotlin. At least in old Java, just to give you one example. In Java, is it 17, Java 16? I'm not sure. There is this record that they now introduced. I don't know the exact syntax for it. I think it's very similar to the data class. And basically it does the same from what I know that the data class does. So also it creates the constructor, the getters, the toString, the equals, the hash code. So this is, for example, one thing. But in Kotlin, it was just built in and available like that. And I like it. Also, that you can define properties like this. If I also want to have a setter, I just say var for variable. I just like it more than always creating these getters and setters. I mean, it's quite easy with the IDE, but still there's so many code added all the time. And it's just a little bit slower than on the Kotlin side. One might argue that there is Project Lombok, where you then just say, I think in that case, we would need add value. Then you can skip all of that. Then it would be also very similar to what we have in Kotlin if you use Lombok like that. But Lombok, I think it's a nice library. It also helps you to get to certain things faster, but it's also a little bit dangerous, especially when it comes to database objects, business objects, where people just randomly use those annotations without thinking what's happening. And that's why I think it's a little bit dangerous. But that is just one example. There are a lot of other things. I made a video, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, where I compared Java and Kotlin a little bit. And in the end, for me personally, I'm happy that I learned the language and made the switch, at least for my private projects, because for me, it's more fun to use it. And especially the standard library for me is way, way easier to use and more intuitive than the Java counterpart. Maybe one last thing. Let me just give you an example. So let's say we have here a list of, list of strings. So let's call that string list, which is a list of 1, 2, 3, or let's say 1, then 2. And in Kotlin, I can write something like this. So I can map it and can, for example, say it to integer. So cast the string to integer, which gives me already an int list. And then I can, for example, print that. So that, I don't know, can we see that somewhere? I don't know how to execute it, but believe me, that basically converts this list of strings to a list of integer with something like that. In Java, it's maybe that's also got optimized in latest versions. I'm not sure. At work, I cannot use the latest versions. I'm stuck currently with Java 11 at most projects. So let's make here a class. Then we have the private static void main stuff. And then we have something like this. So we could use var in Java as well if you use Java. I think that was actually introduced with Java 10 or Java 11, but also a little bit old school Java. So we would have a list of string, which is a string list. And that is, for example, a list of, that would also be Java 11, where we have 1 and we have 2. And don't forget the semicolon as well. Then make all these import stuffs here. And now to convert that in Java, we need to make, first of all, a stream. Then we can call the map method on it, where we can also write this it, and there is no toIn. So we would need something like integer value of, and then we pass in the string, but that's not it. Then we need to collect it again and make it, for example, an unmodifiable list if we want to have that. Then here we get back a list of integer. I think maybe big even could be nullable in Java again. I think I cannot make it just an int because this one here is an integer. And then finally I can make it, or I can finally print it like that. And this, so all this overhead all the time. So call this stream, then always call the collect thing to get a list out of it. In my opinion, in Kotlin, for me, it's just more intuitive to the standard library, that it simply does what I expect it to do. I can always overrule it. So if I don't want to have a list, I can make it to a set, a mutable set, whatever. But the default case, I think in most cases, is that you simply get back your list. And Kotlin, in my opinion, especially the standard library, just does a lot of things right. Yeah. I think I will stop it at that. I hopefully I made my point. Also, thank you for posting about LibGDX constantly. It helps a lot. Any tips when beginning working on LibGDX for the very first time? Oh, that's rough to say, because for me that was many, many years ago. And the first project that I did that failed miserably because quite tough to implement certain features that I wanted to have. I was not that familiar with OpenGL, how the rendering was happening. I fell in all the beginner traps, like the how's it called? The texture bleeding, where the background has then some weird lines when I was rendering something, and took me hours or days to find the solution, how to fix it. I did not know about texture atlases and things like that. So quite tough. I would just say, have an idea, have some motivation to make something happen, whatever that is. So for example, I don't know, you want to make Tetris or whatever game you want to have, and then just start with it, try to finish it. That is always the best thing or the most important thing. Try to finish it. Set a goal. Most likely your goal will be way too high. So for example, could be you want to have Tetris with a menu, save the high score and whatnot. Usually you have way too many ideas and it's simply too much for a beginner project. But still, just go the entire way until the end. You will learn a lot from your mistakes. Also for future games, you have then an idea, what can you do better? How can you optimize certain things? So in my opinion, the most important thing is just start with something that motivates you and that is fun for you and really go from start to end. Don't just stop in the middle like million of other people are doing, which are starting projects and never finish. The most important part, in my opinion, is finish the project. Just cut off some of the fancy features or the icing on the cake, just reduce some of these things and just try to finish whatever project or idea you have. I think that's the most important one. Okay, then enough chit-chatting because I don't have a lot of time today. And I actually did not mention that, but today it will not be a long stream. I had a little bit of a tough week and I don't want to think about more complex things here, like with this player force and moving the swarm from left to right and detect the player and blah, blah, blah. That's way too difficult. We will split that on another day. Today we will make something simple, which is simply this set value setting of our objects. And what I mean with that, let's close this application. Let's close all of that. What did we change here? I think the tolerance. Let's also revert that. I don't want to change that currently. Then we also move the player to a different location. Let's also restore the map to its original. And now what I mean with set ordering is that currently you see the saw is in front of the platform, but actually I want to have it in the background. Also, the player, now he is in front of the saw, but at some point he's not in front. Okay, we sorted it by the Y coordinate, I guess. So you see, now he is at the back of the saw, and then at some point he switches in front of the saw. And I don't want that. So what I want to have is the option that I can define if a movable object or a game object is drawn in the background of the map or in the foreground of the map. And yeah, maybe even more than that, that some objects are always in front of the player. But for now, for this little feature, we will make it like that, that we want to have the option that certain game objects are in the background of the map and certain other objects are in the foreground. And what I thought of how to solve that the best and most flexible way would be most likely to just have a separate object layer, which we could call, for example, background objects, and we move them at the bottom, and then just, for example, how can I don't know, I think I cut it off here and then just paste it again? No. How can I move an object from one layer to the other? Is that even possible? Yeah. Oh, by the way, one more thing. I did not do that here on my personal computer, but it's an important one and it annoys the hell out of me. So there is a settings option in tiled, and there I can luckily change the language to English, which is a lot better because most of the tutorials and threads that we see out there, it's in English. Also on stream, I talk in English, so it's just better if the tiled editor is also in English. And I just saw an option which is move object to layer and background objects. Yeah, perfect. So that one we can maybe leave in the foreground. And that one here again, for example, we can move back to the background. So in the editor, we already see, so these saws are now in the background of the platform. That one here would still be in the foreground. And now let's think that through. So what do we need to do? When we have our tiled service, I think that one reacts to, let me think, to a map change event, and then it spawns all these entities. And what we would need to know now when we iterate through our dynamic game objects here, we would need to know, so there's, we actually have here the layer directly per name. Aha. I think that's an okay option, because why would you need even more object layers than that? I think it's good enough if you have background, normal objects, and then maybe one last one, which would be foreground objects, which are always in front of the player. Let's move that up here. And we could, for example, move this saw to the foreground objects. Okay, that's easy. And then we would have maybe something very convenient like object layers. And that is a map of, and then let's say, for example, -1 to background objects, then 0 to objects, and then +1 to foreground objects. Not sure if that is the correct set ordering, but we will roll with that. And finally, we can then just iterate over these, where we get the set index and the layer name. We could actually already, let's do it like this. And in here, we then don't have the hard-coded object's name here. We will have it like this. And to our spawn game object entity, we also pass the set index, which we can then add. And we can set that on the graphic component, I guess. Did we have it available here? Yes, set equals, let's call it set index here at the top. Then maybe here also, let's call it set index, because we have more than enough space. And replace with Kotlin's for that. Okay, I think theoretically that should be already the tiny little tweak to make the game crash. Layer background objects does not exist for map. How did we call it? With the underscore, but I don't like the underscore. Let's make it like this, because we did not use the underscore anywhere. So let's call it like this. Okay, maybe also it could be that we don't have these layers at all, but I think this is also, most likely in a team you would prepare like a template map, which has the basic layers and layouts that you would expect in your game available, and then people just copy and paste from it and create the new maps. Yeah, I think that's good enough. So let's try once more. And it looks like that is already working. So this saw is now in the background and the flare is in front of it. That's correct. Then here, that is... Aha, okay, that is correct with our current render logic. So this one here is in the background, that's correct. That's okay with our current render logic, but actually... Haha. Let me think about that. So here you see that this object is in front of the platform. Because Which layer is it? Yes. Because the way we are currently rendering is we render the background layers, which is that one. No. Why is then this saw rendered in the background? Huh. Here I need to understand something. Wait, why is that then even working? So this entity is definitely rendered before the background layer. How does that work? Because our render system, it applies the viewport, then it's rendering all the backgrounds, and only after that it renders the entities. Yes, so good question. So why is that even working? Let's see, do we have this objects information anywhere else? No, we just have it once. We did not need that name anywhere else. So why is that rendering then working? I don't get it. That should not work. Or am I stupid? We are rendering the background layer. So those two are rendered first. And then the saw would be rendered. So why the hell do I see the saw behind here? Something is working where I think it should not work, to be honest. That confuses me. Wait, there's a there is a, okay, I think I get it. The backgrounds are passed as foreground layers because I see the player is now also in the background here. So we have actually an issue, which is here. So here we have, how did we implement this logic? So we go through all the layers. If it's a tiled web tile layer, we add it to the current layer, which initially is the background. And then we have an object layer switch from background to foreground. So this is actually wrong. That's not correct. When do we actually want to switch? So if it is a map layer and layer.name equals objects. Then we need to make the when statement like this. Okay, and to know that there are two areas where we use this object stuff, I would say we go to the tiled service. And here in our companion object, yeah, let's make here maybe a val, an extension property to the map layer, is objects layer. And there it is simply overwriting the get method, which is this name equals objects. Okay, then I want to have it as a method. I switched my mind. I want to have a method. It's more consistent with, like, I think is empty is also a method or is not empty. So is objects layer should also be a function. So let's quickly find that area from before. So here we have it like that. Also not great. Anyway, tiled service, render system. We can have here then is objects layer. And that's a Boolean function, by the way. And why is that not working? Cannot be applied to Boolean and okay, and don't you do the comparison anymore. Okay, so if we find the objects layer, we have an object layer, switch from background to foreground layer. We have let's keep it like that. So now the rendering, so the saw should now be still in front. Yes, that is what I expected. The player is also in the front, but the player here is all the time in front of the saw because that one has set index -1. That one has set index +1, which is always in front of the player. And this one is also a background saw. And now we just need to adjust, that may be a little bit trickier. We need to adjust the correct rendering order for our entities. So how can we do that? So this one here is sorting the entities and then is iterating through all of them. I'm thinking now maybe we need to render twice, but I actually don't want to loop through the entire entity or through the entire family twice. I don't like that a lot. What could be a proper solution for that? So family for each. I think there is no way to iterate from over indices, right? I cannot iterate. Let me check for each. Is a little, it does some stuff inside which is necessary. And then actually the action that you apply here gets called here. But I would need something special. I'm thinking currently towards maybe that I have an entity tag for a background entity and one for foreground entity. And what I could then do in my render system, I don't call that one here directly. I overruled it. I have then here my, in total, 3 families, background entities, normal ones, and foreground entities. They get automatically correctly updated by the entity component system. And then I just iterate through them. This is the idea that I have, which would mean on... Let me think that through. Can I simplify that? I could also keep it like that. Sort the entities, iterate through them once, and store them in the correct, maybe separate lists, but then I would again need to iterate through all of them. No, I don't like that approach. So we will do a little bit of refactoring. We have a graphic component and we will remove this set index here. But do I need that? No, I think... No, we don't need that anymore. So let's remove the set index. I think that's the way to go. Then we need to add entity tags where we have something like background and another one which is called foreground. Okay, then back to our tiled service. We can keep the set index, I would say, but we don't set it like this. We will have something like if set index is smaller than 0. Okay. Yeah, -1, 0, 1. Okay, we will have it like this. So if it's smaller than 0, then we add the background tag to the entity. Otherwise, if it's greater 0, we add the foreground tag to it. And if it's exactly 0, then we don't need a special tag for it. Then it's not necessary. Okay. And now back in our render system, we actually just need, let me think. We don't need an iterating system anymore. We just need or do we need that? No, I think an interval system is what we need. Without all of this stuff here. And now we have our custom family. So first of all, we have background entities. That is a family where we have entities with a graphic component and the entity tag background. Okay. Then we have foreground entities. Those are the same entities, but they have the foreground entity tag. And finally, the normal entities. Entity tag. Whoop. Okay. And finally, the normal entities. Let's put them in the middle. And they have a graphic component and they don't have a background tag and they don't have a foreground tag. Yeah. Then what do we want to do now? So background entities are rendered before the background layer. So what we would need to do is background entities sort, and we need a comparator. So entity comparator equals, and then we can use this compare by. So we have sorting by the entity comparator. And then for all of these, it's then not on tick. We can then also make that a private function and call it render entity, for example. We could actually also make it an extension function. Yeah, let's make it like this. Entity dot render. Then here we have this. And it's actually a one-liner currently. Not sure if that gets more complex, so let's keep it like this. But basically we have here then it.render. Okay. Since we always need to sort and then iterate over it, let's maybe make it like this. So let's call that render entities, which takes, what is that? This is a family. So family, and then family sort with our entity comparator, and then family for each. And there we have this code here, which can be actually current. Then let's simplify it. So it's it.graphic and then the sprite, and then we draw it with the batch. That's it. And yeah, that's really it. So now here we have then render entities, background entities. Then we render the background layer. Then we have the normal entities. And finally, the foreground, I guess afterwards, right? So here we have the foreground entities. So something like that. Let's see. Okay. So we have more texture bindings and draw calls, which makes sense because we need to switch between our object texture and the background texture. But I already see, so the saw is now correct in the background. This saw is correct in the foreground, so it's in front of the map, and this saw here is again in the background. So that was a solution to do it. Nice. So it's easier for me, or why did I choose this approach instead of this set index that we had before in the graphic component, and where we had some sorting already working. But the problem was, in my opinion, I have one list of entities which has then the sorted list of entities by the X, Y, and Z value, which is good. But I would need to iterate to a certain index and render them before the background. Then I would need to render the entities in the middle, which would be that part here. And finally, the entities at the end. And this is, in my opinion, I know it's not possible in Flex, because maybe also in other entity component system, it's not so easy, because this loop here, this for each stuff, has some logic in it. So there needs to be some update stuff and special locks in the entity component system that if you would then update the entity within your action and something like that, that all of that is properly working. And currently there's only a support that it iterates over all entities. I might need to add a way to just iterate over a certain index of this entities list here. So that could be an enhancement for Flex. But the easier solution for now was to simply make 3 separate families. That's not a huge deal. And Flex in the background just anyway takes care of that the correct entities are then inside these families. So here, the entities with the background tag. Here, the entities with the foreground tag. And here, all the entities which don't have a background or foreground tag. And then we can simply render them correctly. So let's call it here background rendering. Send or middle layer rendering. And foreground rendering. Okay, that is that part here. So this was something that we really wanted to do. And that's it for today. So this day, as mentioned, I need to split it up because today I really don't want to think through the more complex topic with the swamp. So let's move those two things to the next day. And I guess that will be on Friday. So on Friday, we will have another stream. And there we will implement this new enemy here, this swamp, that will then walk around and smash the player and squash him if he is next to a wall or something like that, or on the ground. And yeah, that's it. So some optimizations that I did off screen Then this optimized user interface, we had that on our list that was also solved off screen. And today we made some optimized or adjusted the rendering a little bit to support also background and foreground layer for game objects, also in the tiled editor. And that's it for today. So thanks for watching. And see you again on Friday. Have a nice evening. Bye bye.